something in our culture that does have us kind of always seeking more. And sometimes we'll complain about that, and we'll be like, we live in such a materialist culture that everything is always, work harder and get more. But yeah, that's also why we go to space. That's why we go to the moon. That's why we go to Mars. And people will talk about like other cultures around the world. Like for example, a friend of mine was in Costa Rica last year, and he came back. And this was a dude who is already pretty chill. This is a guy who already doesn't do much with his life, man. This is the guy who's already pretty laid back. He came back from from Costa Rica, and he was saying, I don't know, it's like over there they're so chill. We should be more like that. They get there when they get there. They're not on a timetable the way that we are. They don't work nearly as much as we do. But there's a reason that people move from the U.S. to Costa Rica, because you take money down there, like average amount of money, you can buy a really nice house over there, a big house over there, because Costa Rica is poor. And there's a reason that they're poor. There's a reason they don't have much stuff. There's a reason that the only reason they have stuff is because they're attached to the United States, as a protectorate. I guess what I'm saying is, Costa Rica does not have a space program. And that's one of the ways I look at countries around the world. It's one of the ways I compare them. People will say, man, but Jamaica, they're so relaxed. A lot of businesses don't even have clocks. They just show up when they show up. And I'm like, Jamaica does not have a space program. A lot of countries in the world do not have space programs. They do not have nuclear programs. Yeah, but they still have a lot. But why do they have stuff? Because the people who come from countries with space programs go there and spend money. And that's the only reason they have anything at all, but for that. And so we can we can idolize those kinds of cultures of just relax, man, there's no big rush, just chill. But really genuinely, where does that get you? It doesn't get you to the moon. It doesn't get you to Mars. It doesn't get you outside the solar system. And for many of us, you might say, yeah, but who cares, man? I don't want to go there anyway. I don't know. Your grandchildren might want to, if we discover an asteroid headed for Earth. All that, if you're in Jamaica, what are you going to say? Asteroid headed for Earth, we're going to be wiped out. Chill, man. It's no big deal. It's a big deal. When you're looking at what's happening with regards to the environment and fossil fuels, you really want to sit there and say, chill, man, no big deal. No, you want countries with space programs and nuclear programs to develop alternate forms of energy, because the number one predictor of a country's ability to escape poverty on a national level is how much access they have to energy. That's your number one predictor. Countries that have access to the most energy do the best. And we might think like, well, so what? That represents a lot of people dying in poverty. It represents a lot of childhood illness. It represents a lot of human suffering. And so, is it that we should therefore just like blitz life and work as much as possible? Or does it mean that we should go the opposite direction, do as little as possible? I don't know, maybe it's somewhere in the middle. But this is kind of a lesson for life, that the places and the people who do the most oftentimes prop up the ones who do the absolute least. A friend of mine is, she's a personal assistant for a very wealthy person over in La Jolla. It's really interesting. She's pretty young, and she earns $85,000 a year. She's in her mid-20s. And she just kind of helps to organize this person's life. That's pretty much it. She's over at Burning Man right now. And you guys hear about what happened at Burning Man this past week or so? But you guys know what Burning Man is. It's a festival of debauchery and music and art. It's the best way of saying it. It's essentially a place out in the desert where every year between 70 and 100,000 people all come together in the middle of the desert. And then they set up like a community for 9 days. And then they set this effigy on fire, and everybody goes home. That's pretty much what it is. It's essentially just like 10 days of alcohol, drugs, and all the worst behavior you can imagine, multiplied by 10, because you can't even imagine some of the stuff that goes on there. Anyway, it rained there this past week, which is the first time in the festival's history it's ever rained. Well, where they have the festival, it's in the middle of a dry riverbed. What that means is that when the dirt there gets wet, gets muddy, it becomes impassable. Anything with tires becomes useless. It means that cars can't drive through there, bikes can't drive through there, even ATVs, the quads, even they can't go through there because the mud gets so muddy, it just cakes everything up. So right now, the festival was supposed to be over yesterday. I think it was yesterday it was supposed to be over. or day before yesterday, there are 70,000 people who are stranded out there in the middle of the desert, and they can't go anywhere. And so my friend was telling me that when the rain hit, a bunch of people left, and each area is like organized into a camp. So everyone's responsible for their own camp and their own cleanup, and I guess they do a pretty good job of cleaning everything up usually. Well, this year, because when the rain started, people knew they were going to get trapped, so people abandoned all those ideals of self-sustaining communities and working together. A bunch of people were like, screw this, man, everyone for themselves. And then a bunch of people just took off as soon as they could, which means that the people who were left behind were the ones who were left behind because they were doing the responsible things, trying to clean up, put everything away. And so the people who did all the wrong stuff left all the mess for the people who are doing the right stuff, if this makes sense. And I remember thinking, I said, well, that's kind of a metaphor for life, isn't it? That's a life lesson right there, that the people who do things right typically carry the load for the massive people who do things wrong. And when you ask, like, well, what percentage of people do things well? A business principle is to essentially say that the square root of your organization do 50% of the production. So in other words, if you have 100 people, let's say we have 100 people working for us, 10 people, so the square root of 100 is 10, 10 people are going to be responsible for half of your production, 50%, which means that 90% of the people, 90% of those people are going to be responsible for the other half. So people who do a whole lot oftentimes carry the load for people who do very little. But that's one of the things about living in the society that we live in, the culture that we live in. We're able to get away with that because that square root of people are so incredibly productive that it can make up for the mass of people who don't do much. The reason that people in Jamaica have any food at all, largely, is because of Western methods that have helped them to develop and grow food and to trade with them. Same with Costa Rica. These are places that don't have space programs. These are places that have taken on the ideal of, hey man, let's just chill. Which, if you can do it and sustain yourself, seems to make sense. But in order to be able to do that, you have to have a list like this. And what do gods need? Not a damn thing. They don't need anything. That's what makes them, that's one of the things that makes the gods gods. They don't need anything. They're entirely self-sufficient. They don't even, we're missing things from this list, by the way. Don't people need to sleep? Gods don't need to sleep. Imagine how much more productive you could be if you didn't sleep. Or imagine how many more video games you could play if you didn't sleep, or whatever it is that you spend your time on. Nobody said clothing. I guess we could get by without that, especially if you're at Burning Man. But largely, this list is pretty long, actually. How about love? How about acceptance to a certain degree? There's a lot of stuff on this list that we don't have. We tend to think of this as just like the basic physical needs, but you're so much more than something physical. Having said that, that's the thing that creates your needs. The fact that you're physical. If you weren't a physical being, you wouldn't need food or water or shelter or money. But this is the thing that you really can't get away from, consciousness. Because even the gods are conscious. But it's our awareness of our frail state. It's our consciousness of our mortality and our frail state that tells us that we need these things. It's also the things that makes us afraid of not getting enough of these things. One of the reasons that we hoard money, not the only reason, but one reason that we hoard money, is because we're so afraid of not having these things, food, water, and shelter. Now, of course, there's also something that we're self-conscious in the sense that we want ourselves to matter. We want to feel like we've accomplished something meaningful in life. And one of the ways that we derive that meaning for some people is to get as much of this as possible also. It's not that you can't afford all the food, water, and shelter, and clothing and that you could ever possibly want. It's that we could always want more because we feel like it says something about us if we have more of this. The more of this I have, especially in relation to the people who seem to have the most, the better I feel about myself. If I said to you, if I could show you, or I could demonstrate to you that, even if you're in this classroom and you work a part-time job right now, you probably have more wealth than most people in the world. Even if you're a teenager with a part-time job, you earn more money. You have more money to spend and you have more access to better stuff than most people in the world. You probably still won't feel good about yourself. You'll probably be like, well, I guess it sucks for people in Venezuela, but you know what? I can't afford a house in La Jolla. I can't afford a house in Eastlake. I'm not Bill Gates. I'm not, thank God, I'm not Elon Musk, and I'm not Jeff Bezos. Well, of course you're not the top, but you're so much better off. But that isn't enough for us, because we compare ourselves not to the other masses. We compare ourselves to people who have the most. Who should we compare ourselves to? Probably ourselves. Are you better today than you were yesterday? If not, then you need to turn something around probably. Are you better today than you were yesterday? Yes. Well, then you're going in the right direction, man. Dope. Keep going in that direction. Better in what sense? You tell me. What matters to you? Are you better in the sense that you have more money? Is that what's important to you? You have more shelter? You have more water and food? You have a better character? You're more honest than you were before? You're stronger than you were before? You're a better person? You're more dependable? You're more reliable? You tell me in what direction. That's why I put consciousness here in fuchsia, because that's the thing that kind of calls our awareness to all of it. That's the thing that tells us we don't have enough, or we have enough, or warns us that we might not have enough someday. It's the thing that calls attention to our mortality, to the fact that we're human. Because to be human is to want stuff. That's one of the things that causes suffering. The more that you want, the more that you have, the more that you want, but the less that you have, that's one of the things that, going back to the Buddhist perspective, causes so much suffering. If you have a car and you're like, I can get where I want to go. Yeah, but it's not a Tesla. I really want a Tesla. Okay, and then you work really, really hard to get one, and then you're going to want the more expensive one too, the next year. Which is fine, by the way. People will say like you shouldn't want that. No, I guess you want what you want. But you can reorganize your priorities. You can, if you think about it, if you conceptualize it. That's the thing, your consciousness, your brain tells you about how to get the things that you want. Your emotions will tell you what you want. And then hopefully you can use your brain to figure out how to get those things after you figure out whether or not you should want those things. But gods have consciousness too. It's also, of course, what it is to be a god. But what they're conscious of is the fact that they don't need anything. I mean, think about how you could behave if you didn't need these things. If you have a job that you don't like, well, you wouldn't have a job you don't like because you wouldn't go to it. But I need the money. For what? Food, water, shelter. You're a god. You don't need those things. And so when you're a god, you don't need people. You don't need things. And what that means, by the way, is that now you're able to enjoy things. If you need people, you can't enjoy people quite the same way. Because there's always a kind of insecurity that the person you need or the people you need could go away. It's one of the reasons that we love family so much. Because we have it in our heads that no matter what happens, no matter whatever happens, family is always there. Okay, maybe that's why we feel closest to them. But is family enough? People say, yeah, family's enough. Yeah, maybe if you live in Kentucky, perhaps. But for most other people who don't want to marry their family, you're going to have to branch outside your family to make another family, or to have other people in your life to be in love with and to be loved by. It's different, hopefully, for you than it would be to marry and love your family. And so we always have to take that risk and take that chance of stepping outside of it. And that's, of course, a risk. And what's the risk? Well, the risk is that you're going to get hurt. The risk is that you're going to have to give up some of the stuff that you have. Well, the more you're attached to these things, well, I suppose the less that you can be attached to people. And of course, by the way, the more attached you are to people, the bigger the risk that you're going to get hurt by them, or just get hurt generally. Because no love ends well. All love ends badly, even if it goes well. Because either you guys split up, which ends badly, or you are in absolute, complete love, and then someone dies. Eventually that's going to happen too. Well, what if you die together? That's still terrible. Imagine dying and your last thought is not even so much I'm dying, but this person next to me is dying as well. Like they're going to die too. I know they are. And that's also terrible. But we go forward anyway because we have a need for that as humans. Gods don't have those needs. So these are the things that actually chain us up. I don't like using the word enslave, but you know what I'm saying. Like you have to work if you want food, water, shelter, and all that. But if you don't want those things, well then how much do you have to do the things that you don't want to do? Very little. If you don't have need for these things, then you don't have to work a job you don't like. If you don't have a need for these things, then you don't have to attach yourself to people who have these things. At that point, all of your relationships are voluntary. Your work relationships, in other words, working at all, your romantic relationships, your friend relationships, even your family relationships. Again, think about some of the stuff that we put up with from family just because it's family. We tolerate everything. Why? Because family. And then we use that phrase that just it's like nails on a chalkboard to me. At the end of the day, they're family. So they can shit on you in the morning and afternoon, but as long as at the end of the day, everything is okay, then that's what makes us okay. That's a way of expressing a deep need for security. At least at the end, I know it's going to be okay, that we're going to fix everything and get along. Yeah, but what about the rest of the day, man? Why can't things be great for the rest of the day? Why does it always have to be at the end of the day that we talk about how things work out? Why can't they start off that way? So, thinking about it, therefore, from that perspective, we have gods and we have people, and then there's something in between, godlike people. And those are people who want very little, or people who need very little. That's how it is to approach a godlike status. That when you don't really need much. And so, your boss comes to you and says, I need you to work Sunday. And you're like, no, I've got something going on Sunday. Well, okay, but then you're going to be fired. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. That's that. Oh, no, I need my job. I need this. Great, boss. I'll see you Sunday. And you put on that smile. Same smile you'll be wearing in your casket, by the way. So the way that you become more godlike is to want less, to desire less. It's interesting. Anybody look this guy up? Diogenes? I hope so. This is a really, really interesting guy. And what's happening in the background here is not just a painting. It's something really, really deep, if you understand what's going on in that painting. And so this was the case with Diogenes. He wanted very, very little. And by the way, if you've got very little, what can people take from you? Yeah, nothing or very, very little. What can Elon Musk lose? Everything. He's already lost $22 billion by purchasing Twitter. $22 billion. Yeah, that's more than $21 billion. And I know some of us go, but it's not $23 billion. It's a lot of money, man. Now, who are you supposed to, is going to lose more of that? Diogenes, who has nothing except for the robe you see him wearing, or Elon Musk? You might say, I'd still rather be Elon Musk. Okay, but just understand that every minute of every day, so many people in the world are gunning for you, trying to take what you have. You're constantly on guard against it. You can't be who you are, or at least you can't be what you want to be, maybe, or maybe you could be. But that's up to you to figure out. But I will say is that the more you need, the more vulnerable you are. That's the thing about self-consciousness and self-awareness. It makes us aware of our vulnerability. When you need stuff, you're vulnerable. Now you have to do what people say. The less you have, the less vulnerable you are. The less people can take away from you. Any of you guys, would you be a really good CIA agent? Because imagine, like I think about that sometimes. I watch movies and they'll have like a CIA agent and they'll kidnap his family and they'll say, tell us what we want to know. And he's like, never. And then they show him in the next room they have his family. Don't hurt them. Then tell us what we want to know. Think about how vulnerable you are. I thought about that. Imagine if I was a CIA agent, they captured me and they're like, tell us everything. I'm like, I know nothing. I'm like Socrates. And then they show a closer camera, they're like my brother in the next room. We're gonna kill him. Dope. I'm not close to my brother. I haven't talked to him in like 15, 20 years. We're gonna kill his whole family. That's a terrible thing to do. Why would you do that? I had nothing to do with this. You're a horrible person. We'll get you information you need. Well, then we're gonna kill your sister too. She's alive? I could have sworn she'd be dead by now. Well, I thought the meth would have taken care of her, but okay, let's see it. Better shoot her with arcane first. If you don't have all those vulnerabilities, you can be way stronger. You don't have to put up with nearly as much stuff. So, questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?